I don't think I've been this excited to share any story so far in my podcast, and I kind of want to tell everybody first how we met. We were at the first live IP Watchdog conference, and there's a reception the first night, and you go around and you're meeting other patent attorneys, and it's great. It's probably even up to that point, it was one of the best conferences I've been to. I see there's a table at the end of a room, in the corner of a room, you might say, and there's this gentleman over there dressed in a white suit. He kind of looks like Mark Twain. For some reason, I'm very drawn to a table, and I go over there and I meet who I now know is Professor Dan Brown and his son, Dan Brown Jr. And I had one of the most fun weekends I've ever had, just hanging out with them and learning about their story. It was a great experience, not just for an IP conference, but, a great life experience. But throughout that weekend, I learned about their story. And I'm like, I have to share this on my podcast. I'm glad we're doing this. So thank you so much for joining.
Oh, good. I have one correction, though. It wasn't a white suit. You make me sound like some kind of a guy out of the disco 80s. It was a nice linen a sport jacket, because we were in the heat of summer in Texas.
Oh, I apologize.
Welcome to Clause 8, the voice of IP, hosted by Eli Mazur. Today's episode features a story of a father-son duo who battled a retail giant over patents. They were on their way to being vindicated until the death of a federal judge changed everything. Professor Dan Brown and his son, Dan Brown Jr., are straight out of Central Casting. The father had a rough childhood at Chicago's South Side before eventually becoming a professor of engineering at Northwestern University. The son is a moppy-haired marketing genius. Together, they invented the Bionic Wrench. After obtaining a patent, they successfully pursued the audacious idea of manufacturing everything in the United States. Sears became their biggest client. However, at one point, Sears started pressuring them to manufacture the Bionic Wrench in China. When they refused, Sears got a different company to make their product in China. And so began the David versus Goliath story of LoggerHead Tools versus Sears. On this episode, Eli talks to Professor Brown and his son, Dan Jr., about the twists and turns of their story, why they continue to have faith in America's patent system, and what it's like to be a father-son duo. Clause 8 is part of IP Watchdog and sponsored by Harity, the go-to firm for the Patent 300 for patent preparation and prosecution.
Professor Brown, do you remember when you first learned about patents?
I grew up, I'm a Southside Irish kid, and didn't have much exposure to business or anything until I got out of college. Then I got, deep in the technology transfer. I was taking a product on a team that was really in the lab, but we were bringing it in the manufacturing. And as we were doing these things for the first time, our customers were patenting everything. And so I didn't know then. I think there was a lot of patents created that I created that were in somebody else's name, but we were happy to get the business. But I really started at that time to be aware of patents.
Dan, you were growing up with your dad, obviously, who was really into patents. Do you remember when you started thinking about the role of patents, when you guys came up with the Bionic Wrench, or was it before that?
Well, I was, growing up, my dad would always bring me to meetings, and, I just always kind of wanted to hang out with him whenever I could. And so I was fortunate enough to go to business meetings, even before he started the Bionic or LoggerHead Tools and was working on the Bionic Wrench. And so I'd find myself in, these fun situations where I'd be in like boardroom discussions, sitting there, really young and just listening. And I knew that he had a bunch of patents because, my dad, he likes to talk about his patents, but I didn't really know what it meant when I was a lot younger. And, going through the experience that happened with Sears, that obviously opened my eyes a lot. But between when I was really young and then, in my mid-20s dealing with the deal with Sears, obviously I was learning a lot more. So, I knew about them, but I didn't really understand exactly what they did when I was really young. And then as I was in LoggerHead with the Bionic Wrench, I was like, this is great. This now gives us the exclusive right to sell our products for a certain amount of time, and no one else can do it. And then the Sears thing happened, and then I learned that's not necessarily true.
Well, I want to the timeline just a little bit because it can be confusing to people. I got my first patent in 1985. Dan was conceived maybe 85, but born in 86. And when I finally did the Bionic Wrench, I had already 30 patents. So what Dan was reflecting on in his youth is, I was a road warrior, and the early stuff that I created for me, very fortunately, scaled. Though I was working for somebody else, my career really moved up, and so people would fly in through O'Hare, from Europe or whatever, licensees, and so I brought my kids to meetings with me because that's the only time I could see them in this business deal, and so they would sit and listen to negotiations on licensing and just resolving those business issues that were going on those earlier patents that I had that I did in basically an industry then as a consultant.
Before you had this whole battle with Sears, which obviously we'll talk about, is you saw the role that patents could play in a positive role. I know this story's been told before, a story about how both of you kind of were involved in coming up with this Bionic Wrench. How did that happen?
Well, my version is, Dan was a junior in high school. It was probably 2002. And I had created a lot of intellectual property, and it created a lot of business for customers of mine when I was a consultant, and before that for employees of mine. And one of the products actually won the National Hardware Show Product of the Year in around 1997, 98. And I was very excited about that because I wanted to publicize my consulting business. And because I was, I had a working contract as a consultant with a very large chemical company. I probably shouldn't say the name. I asked them, could I use this award in my promotions for my business? And I thought they would say yes, and they said no. It went up their corporate chain, and they really didn't want to. They wanted to be seen as the innovator. They didn't want to be seen that somebody on the outside innovated it, and that sort of that upset me, obviously. Now, I could show patents and things; those were public domain, but that's hard when you're selling to show people patents because their eyes sort of glass over. But I sort of made a goal for myself to do a concept of commercialization of my own that I wouldn't be encumbered by that. So I started looking for opportunities, and I was busy with other work, but around 2002, I was really getting serious about it. I wanted to do it, and I had asked Dan to change over our lawnmower. We have a big riding lawnmower and then a pull-behind mulcher, and if anybody's been in that, we had a big area with a lot of oak trees, and it's a chore every year. If you don't get those leaves off the grass, all your grass is dead in the spring. And so, Dan's job around the house was to do that kind of stuff, and I had told them to switch the lawnmower blades over in the spring from mulching leaves to mulching grass, and then I went about what I needed to do, and he came skulking into my office. I have in my office at home a tool chest with you could put a motor on it and drive it down the street because I did a lot of mechanical engineering work, and the reality was I needed that. But then I had the complementary set of home tools like everybody has, which he should have went to, but like anywhere else, they're spread all over. You don't have the right size.
Yeah.
And so as he was going through my tools, he pulled out a robo-grip, which is an adjustable pliers, and I immediately said, listen, don't use that robo-grip on those nuts and bolts because the reality is next year when you're at college, I'm going to have to do this, and they're going to be stripped out, and there's going to be a lot of problems. And father-son, relationship ensued, and an argument ensued that he needed something that could grip and hold. The things were gunked up. They're already, sort of rounded, and, we went back and forth, and finally, he took the robo-grip and did it, and I went back to work. And now the light bulb didn't go off in a eureka moment because that's not the way the stuff works. But as I rolled it over for a month or two, that was a real problem that he was dealing with, and that was a real right now problem. And there really wasn't a product out there to do it. So it sort of inspired me to see, could I develop an adjustable wrench that adjusted with the simplicity of a pliers, but with the performance of a wrench, where you weren't going to be stripping the nuts and bolts, and you had that engagement on the flats.
Great story. So the genesis of this Bionic Wrench, I think it's fair to say, came from an argument between you two, which is a great story. At what point
because most every step of the way, I get that kind of blowback.
I mean, we've had a lot of arguments, and I can't even. There would be so many other products that we'd have if he would have just listened a little bit more.
You said it was a long journey to actually coming up with a final Bionic Wrench, but when did you start thinking, well, this could be a huge success, we could turn it into a whole business?
Well, people don't realize it, but invention starts with real right now problems, right? An invention about some solution to a problem that doesn't exist is a vanity patent, or it's not going to scale or be commercially viable. When I recognized that was a real right now problem, that was and it still is to this day, that's the key opportunity to move forward and try to solve that problem in a new, useful, and non-obvious way, which is what you need for a patent to then base a business off of. There's many, many other contingencies like costs or whatever, but it all starts with a real right now problem.
The Bionic Wrench, there's actually a Wall Street Journal article about it. The Bionic Wrench went on to win a lot of awards, including an International Design Award. And the other winner that year, I think it was 2005, 2006, was Apple for the iPad Nano. But the difference is that unlike Apple, you decided to manufacture your wrench entirely in the United States. Why was that important to you? And would you have started your business in the United States if you didn't have patent protection?
Well, there's a long story to that, but just to keep it brief, it's simply the way I was raised. I was a Southside Irish kid. We were in the lower economic level of society. My dad worked at the stockyard for 20 years after being in the war, after being at the stockyards before that. He never went to high school. He went right to working in the stockyards. He lost his job. It was a decimation to our family life. It was bad. And fortunately, my mother was a nurse, and she was able to keep it going through the other jobs that my dad was able to do. But, I've lived that economic situation when you can't really support the family. And a good job has always been the best social system from my upbringing. Fast forward, I was working on a lot of new products during the early 80s when a lot of things were made in the States here, but then watched in the mid 80s through the 90s as we were losing all these jobs to China. And I never bought into the Kool-Aid that, we can be a service economy and we can make things there. And I knew it because my dad he eventually got a job as a janitor, but he was not going to be retrained to be a computer programmer or something. That there was a whole element of society that really didn't go to college, and these manufacturing jobs are important. So having had to bring products to China as a consultant and seeing some of the games and arbitrage that were going on that were not right, I was committed to bring my product out in the States. And that was an extremely important part of this whole process.
I guess you were confident in doing that because of that patent protection you had?
I've been in a lot of patent litigations prior, because when you have products that scale, you have success in the market, competitors knock you off, and they go through the gambit of, can they defeat the patent, et cetera. Now, every case that I had been through before, we always came out on top. We had good patents, and the ability to enforce those were there. It's not the same way today, but so I had the confidence that if I can get a patent, what I did was took my retirement, I remortgaged a house that was almost paid off, and I took whatever savings we had and I invested it in commercializing this product. So the reality is that with absent the ability to have a patent and protect it, it would have been complete insanity to take all that money, because if people can just copy you and knock you off, you do all the pioneering work and then someone knocks you off, right? And being an American-made product, I have that arbitrage where, people can just take the product once it's developed, send it to China and come in at a much lower price. There's no way I could have made an American-made product without the faith that I had patents that were good and that I could enforce them.
Eventually, it became quite successful. You were selling it through different channels, but then Sears asked to become your exclusive customer, but then somewhere along the way, they started pressuring you to make it in China. Maybe I'll ask Dan this question. I think you're maybe a little more business-minded than your dad, if it's fair to say.
It's very fair to say.
I don't think so.
but was that an argument? Were you telling your dad, like, let's just make them in China? Or were you on board with your dad's plan to make them in America?
No. I mean,
stick with that.
Yeah, we argue all the time, but that's not something we argued about. This is something that, I very much believe in. And even the company that I started here after the pandemic, the InstaShield, was a face shield that we both worked on that fits on a baseball cap. I was really big on making that in the United States. And so I definitely, and I think it's part of it's part of our brand. It's part of our identity to make in the United States. And this is not an iPhone, and not that you can't make iPhones in the United States, but I'm sure you can. But this is it's a simple thing that should be made here. It's not that difficult to do, and it definitely creates jobs. And so I'm always been big on Made in USA. What my frustrations are these major retailers who you have a few buyers that have all this power to decide what you see on a shelf. And they try to pressure you, they try to, kind of bully you at times to do things that you don't want to do, and they actually are destructive to your business. And so we always stood firm on that. And, and that was from the leadership of my dad. This big pro Made in USA thing is obviously my dad's vision, and I have seen, how the positive effects of it. And I obviously am a big proponent now too, but I've learned that from him. And I think that, our brand represents that, and I very much, I never wanted to go to China now, but it does make it difficult, right? Because that's the world we live in, where and there's nothing wrong with people making their products in China, right? A lot of products are, but I think that it's a smart move, and I think over long term, hopefully, I think things are coming back here, and with automation and robotics and things like that, I think a lot more will be coming back here.
As you mentioned, there was a lot of pressure for you by Sears to make them in China. You refused, and then they kind of go silent on you, stop communicating with you.
Well, they placed an order with us. They actually placed an order at the level. So when you show up at the door of a buyer, they don't just say, okay, here's an order for 1 million units. You go through trials and tests, and we actually built, and Dan was a very important part of this, videos that were run on TV, commercials that we funded to prove that this would sell at an American-made price, which they never believed. So in 2008, 2009, 2010, we did versions of this advertising and scaled it up to where we were ready to go big. And so we had about 300,000 units at Sears, and we sold those out between Black Friday and before Christmas. And they thought the advertising cost was going to be X because they had all the advertising metrics from Craftsman. We did it at half the advertising cost. So all of a sudden, all these people that were, saying, well, you can't do that, you can't sell at that price, they said, we're going to sell 1 million units next year. And we were going through the negotiations, but as we did that, they which they always do, they wanted to squeeze blood out of the rock. Well, we were at our rock bottom price, and we couldn't lower the price even more. Our supply chain and people all worked very hard with us to do the price at 300,000 to prove it. And then they just, I think they just say, okay, meeting 1, 2, 3 for next year. 1, we start pushing them a little. 2, that we start twisting their arm, and meaning 3, we bring out the sledgehammer, and you go through that cycle of the pricing, and we just couldn't go any lower. And so they said, well, then we'll take it to China. We'll sell it at the American made price. We'll take it to China. And it was pure greed. And we said no. So we got an order actually for the next year, but it wasn't the 1 million unit order. And they were, I think, continuing to think that they were going to be able to get us to do it. But when we refused, what they did is they got their biggest supplier, Apex Tools, to do it. But the radio silence was, okay, we got the order, things are going, we're going to sell the Bionic Wrench. And they actually had the Bionic Wrench in the stores the following year. But, they had their knockoff, which was a clear patent violation there. And the long story short is they were emboldened by it because it's called the piracy business model. You can't protect your patents now the way I used to when we were fighting other patents in the past. That the efficient infringement or predatory infringement, they call it, is alive and well, and it's getting worse every year. It's terrible.
And just to give a sense, I mean, the price that they were being sold for your Bionic Wrench was $30. So it wasn't some crazy
Actually, it was
price.
like $20 on special at Christmas.
Yeah, like regular price $24.99, and $19.99 on Christmas. So, and they were making very good margins. I think a lot of these major retailers, if we really want to see why a lot of these jobs have left, it really, and there's a lot of books about this. It starts because these major retailers, the few buyers at the top, basically kind of force these companies to go overseas, and it's kind of one of these things where it's forced because they know that if they don't, then they're going to work with their competitor that does, right? And if you're selling a commodity, you kind of got to go because, it's a commodity. But when you have a patented product, you have that choice. And that's why we need a stronger intellectual property rights system, because more and more jobs will continue to go overseas, even if you have a patent, because if not, you get a target on your back and people say, hey, well, this is made in the United States. We can go ahead and knock it off, make a lot more money, and then tie these guys up in, litigation.
So Eli, you alluded to something, and here is the ultimate irony, right? A buyer will say, oh, well, we have to do that. The competition's doing that. We won't make money unless they go to China. Through depositions and discovery in our trial, we found that not only did they make a lot of money on the Bionic Wrench, it was the most profitable tool for them in the category, beating Craftsman. So the stuff from China was even less profitable than the Bionic Wrench. So that argument does not hold water. What held water was we built the price and the value in the market, and we proved we can get people through advertising to go in the Sears driveway. And another irony of this situation is when you have a thing like the Bionic Wrench and that's being advertised, people will destination purchase. They'll go and purchase it at that store where it's being advertised. But what people don't see is when people go to the stores like that, there's a thing called the shopping basket in retail terms. How much other product are they buying while they're there? The wrapping paper, the Christmas cards, all these things that they could buy anywhere. And the shopping basket was many more times. So the average sale wasn't $20. It was up just under $100. Well, that's a lot of profit associated with that product. It was just pure greed on their part. They just wanted to, make as much money as possible and squeeze us to almost death on the process.
Back when Sears used to have ads, they have a lot of American flags on their ads. If you go to the stores, they have a lot of American flags in their stores. Can you tell us a little bit about, you actually discovered that they were specifically telling Apex to copy your tool, right?
Yeah, I don't know. They were smoking guns. So in the beginning of the emails, and all this is in the court documents, they sent a picture of a crimper that sort of looked like our device and said, this is what we want. But as they tried to make it a wrench, it wouldn't work. And so crimping tools are made for high force concentration, and ours is made to distribute the load. And this one they had was like building a watch. Ours is a very simple. We had the patent around ours, and every iteration that came back, and they kept morphing it till it was a knockoff. And the reason is that what they tried in the beginning, the half-hearted attempt to design around it, just did not work. And the reality was, it got down to the smoking gun was Apex Tools had to start making the product in order to get it there for Christmas. The time was running out, and Apex, who indemnified Sears on the patent violation. Indemnification means if they were found guilty, Apex was going to be responsible for it. They could not get clearance for freedom to operate. They couldn't get the opinion. And there's an email between an engineer and one of the vice presidents saying, we don't have the freedom to operate opinion. And the vice president said, go. Knowing they didn't have a freedom to operate. And their lawyer saying, well, we really need this freedom to operate because that will protect us from willful infringement. That's in their correspondence. So that's a pretty good smoking gun.
As I guess as patent attorneys who are listening to this know, it's not that hard to get a freedom to operate opinion. And I
Right.
guess that's
So
pretty
what they're
telling that
telling
they
you is that
couldn't.
that lawyer was feeling fairly, not even comfortable, because freedom to operate opinions are pretty much, you just order them and you fill in the blanks, right? And so, yeah, so the
Exactly.
fact that they couldn't get it
Most of the time.
was really an indication. And the reality is, this attorney had seen this evolution and the change, and I'm sure he was fast forwarding if they ever got into a litigation, that it would not look good for them.
You find out that, Sears is now selling these knockoffs. I'm sure you were probably devastated and angry and all that. But what was your strategy? I guess, what did you think you needed to do at that point to kind of overcome this problem or fight back and so forth?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
go
ahead.
So,
Yeah.
so right when this happened, right? So, yeah, this was not, we were surprised, upset, angry, a bunch of different emotions. And the first thing I thought was, I was just completely surprised because I didn't realize how bad and how common that this was amongst the industry, right? And so my first inkling was let's go out to the press, right? We need the court of public opinion to see what's happening here, right? Because this is crazy. This is the American dream is at stake when you have giant corporations trying to crush the little guy, right? They should be embracing the little guy. And that's the American dream, right? That you can one day become one of these larger companies because you have intellectual property, you've created value, and you've got this great product or service, and you can grow your company. And the exact opposite was happening, right? We were being, instead of growing our company, we had just been on a national TV commercial, had great success with Sears. We were going to then go to all the other major retailers and also add them to our commercial. At the end where it says available at Sears, also say available at Home Depot and Lowe's and all these. And we got cut at the knees because now we have this inferior product on the market. They're undercutting our price, and it goes and taps into your sales, and then you have to try to get money and try to fund a legal battle. So we immediately went to the press, and we got we were very fortunate because it's not easy to get into the press. We got into the New York Times. New York Times did an article about it. It then went on the front page of the Yahoo News. Over a long weekend, we had thousands and thousands of comments. I mean, people were talking about, they were coming out of the woodwork about, their Sears laundry machine that, was broken. And, it's just an unbelievable amount of people that are angry. And also, I think, surprised. And then we got on ABC World News with, at the time, Diane Sawyer, David Muir came to our plant. And I think that really helped us. And obviously, my dad then, so I was working on that. My dad was obviously working on trying to get lawyers and contingency and just, and it was a total survival mode. And we didn't know what was going to happen because, we didn't have deep pockets. Like my dad said, he had remortgaged his house already. We were already all in. And so we had to be really scrappy and try to figure it out. And then we also were hoping for a lot of luck, right? Doesn't hurt to have some luck.
So I wanted to dig into it because one of the complaints by patent owners is that most of the media coverage that you hear is probably unfavorable to patent owners. How were you able to get the media's attention? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
You try to get different hooks it depends on who, a lot of these media is usually biased, right? All is. And so, you try to make a hook for different, depending on what the outlet is and what are their biases. And so, we went after different hooks and, not to get into all the details of that, but I think that the story itself, just the story of an American inventor, trying to live the American dream and getting undercut by a giant corporation, that right there, just what the truth, what happened.
But I think the finger that came out of the dike is luck. I was called by the Alliance of American Manufacturing to give a comment on the state of manufacturing. Yeah, the election coming up and that type of thing. And I said, sure. So there was a reporter that called me to interview me about my views and what the future of manufacturing was looking like, in the States. And I gave her answer to the questions, and she said, well, how's your company doing? And I told her the story, because it was almost the same week that the knockoff appeared. And then she was typing so furiously that I could hear the clicks over the phone. And she says, I'm not going to quote you on this American manufacturing article. I'm going to do the backup on this. And then we gave her the information and all our contacts and stuff, and she did the research and actually did an article on it. And
well, and here's the hook here, right? So I was very much watching, Apex Tools and different things, and I feel like this is what entrepreneurs have to do, right? So my political views are totally neutral, but what I did was I noticed that Apex Tools was bought by Bain Capital, and this is right before the election. And Mitt Romney was a very big part of Bain Capital, and so you kind of have to try to look at hey, what is the New York Times looking for? New York Times, they're more liberal, they're more progressive, and totally fine, no big deal. And so I was pitching this to my dad, and then he got this opportunity to talk to this. And then he mentioned that, and I think they liked that. And then if you look at the article, it's part of that, right? It didn't, sway the election or anything. It actually was written after the election. But you got to find those news hooks that get them to want to, kind of, for them, it's killing two birds with one stone. They have a great story, but then also they might want to incorporate some companies that maybe they wanted to shine a light on. And I think at that point, Bain Capital buying Apex Tools was the hook.
That's amazing. Obviously, you didn't have resources to hire these big PR firms that many do hire to try to tell their story. I think that's pretty amazing that your story came out nationally. I think you kind of hinted at it. Were you hoping that just that alone would be enough to kind of shame Sears and to kind of get them to back down and say, all right, we're going to stop with this knockoff and we're just going to go back to just selling the Bionic Wrench? Were you optimistic that would be enough?
The most important part of that was the leverage I got working with law firms, and their ability to know that this can be a national level trial, and the publicity for lawyers and their firms to do that were great. And we ended up with a firm, Skiermont Derby, Paul Skiermont and his partner. The reality was that they had broken off from some big firms and started their own firm. And contingency litigation with third-party funding was part of their business model, and it just all worked out. The point was that they were looking for clients, and we had not just a strong patent and the case and the story, that it all came together in a critical mass that really worked out well.
And to add to that point, I mean, I wasn't looking to shame Sears. I was looking to educate the population on what reality is, right? We have this fairy tale version of, you make this product and you bring it to these retailers and they want to help you so much. I'm not trying to say all these retailers are bad, and it's not even to shame Sears. This is a industry problem. They do not embrace innovators, right? And they don't necessarily, I don't think, it's my opinion, that I don't think they respect them. And so I wanted to blow the whistle on what our experience was, because there's no way this will ever change unless these retailers and there's also other giant brands like Telebrands, with the bunch of balloons and all these different products. If they think they can get away with it and no one's going to talk about it, why stop, right? Certainly they're not, getting in much trouble with the patent laws. And so for me, it was just kind of like, this is unbelievable, right? And I just I was trying as hard as possible to get our that out there, because that is some way, to fight back and also to just try to shine a light on this huge problem.
We're going to talk more about that, but you're still trying to do that. So I think that's quite amazing. After you brought on this firm, obviously it's a pretty well-known firm. Did Sears try to settle with you at that point? Were they willing? Did they get any more reasonable?
Well, you got to think about it. Sears was indemnified by Apex Tools. Sears was obviously going through their own stuff with Eddie Lambert and losing money, and they were not in great shape. And I don't think they feared anything, because the bottom line is you may get a black eye out of it, but Apex Tools was going to write any checks. So that's another thing that the retailers do, is they have their suppliers indemnify them, and then you have to sue more than one person, obviously, then, which is more expensive, but it gives them this false security. And I think the problem is, and we discussed this, but if you willfully infringe a copyright or a trademark, it could be criminally liability, and you can't Sears would have been involved in a criminal situation like that, but because it's only paying a fine, or even willfulness damages and then potential punitive damages. Sears knew Apex was on the hook for that. And we had other fraud charges and stuff with Sears, but they didn't. The judge didn't attach them to this case. They kept it as a patent case. We would have had to do a separate lawsuit, which I mean is just unbelievably expensive. It's a David and Goliath battle. So I don't think Sears was in any situation. And then Apex, I remember reading on one of their websites when their corporate report, they said, to tell their advisors, always be prepared. We can always get sued for the violation. I think it was part of their business model. And if you look at the tool industry, I mean, 25, 30 years ago, there was a bunch of small brands out there, that were often inventor established companies that these big companies have bought up and moved the production to China. And that sort of been the modus operandi in that business model.
My sense, they weren't going to settle. From that point, it took about 5 years to get to trial in the Northern District of Illinois. The original judge, Judge John Dara, he passed away, and a new judge, Judge Rebecca Palmeyer, took over that case. She initially accepted Judge Dara's claim construction. There was a trial. A jury found in your favor. And then the new judge, she changed her mind.
Well, not only that, the jury found in our favor and then found willful infringement against both parties. And as you know, and the lawyers know out there, willful infringement is rare. And we couldn't find another case where two parties were found to willfully infringe. That's how much the smoking gun was there. And so, I mean, we were elated to win, and then the next day to get willful infringement felt totally vindicated.
So the verdict was $6 million with willful infringement. It should have been $18 million. And then she changed the claim construction after she held a trial based on the original claim construction. And then on summary judgment, she just ruled in favor of Sears. So there wasn't even another jury trial.
It's like watching the Super Bowl and you think, you won. And then all of a sudden after the game, they say, you know what?
A year after the game almost.
Touchdowns are worth a different amount of points. Field goals are worth a different amount of points. Turns out the other team won. That's what it felt like at least, right? And I'm not an expert in all this stuff. My dad knows a lot more about that. But that's insane, right? What we spent so much money and time in our funders and our great legal team. This is crazy, right? And we went through all of that. And then, I just don't understand who can afford all this, right? It's like this system is really not built for, I would say, everyday people unless they have major funding.
It's rigged. If you can't afford to run a $3 million lawsuit, you can't protect your rights. So you could be right, like we were, and we even won, and then you still get hosed in the end. Who knows why she changed her mind? The Sears or Apex, they didn't even push that out there to get it dismissed. She came on this, and in her opinion, all she was supposed to do was decide what the punitive damages are, comes out with this other opinion that was totally inconsistent. No one could even explain it to me, even under the constructs of the law. And here we are in limbo. Our patents are valid. She didn't say our patents were invalid, and all the elements of the trial are there, except she wasn't going to approve the award.
Crazy part of the story is that Apex Tools and Sears didn't even have the audacity to ask for what she ended up doing on her own. Didn't touch upon it, but it's kind of things up to that point kind of lined up. You got the national news attention, which led to Kerman and Derby taking on that case, handling it for 5 years. They won, and then it's kind of the rug is pulled under them after that. What kind of lesson does it teach to another law firm that might want to take on a case like this in the future and help inventors?
So what we did is, because she's obviously played her hand with that opinion, our only choice was just to go to the Fed Circuit and hopefully that they would pay attention to this and answer all the points that the lawyers artfully brought out, and what she did was wrong. But then we go to the Fed Circuit and thinking, okay, they understand patent law more, this kind of stuff. And they ruled 36 to us, which most lawyers will know what it is, but people don't know. They take the case, but they render no opinion. They let the case stand as decided in the district court. And, you get 15 minutes, and it appeared to me that this was like almost a charade. The district judges, and they just picked
and they
up
offer no written opinion.
No, yeah, it's just crazy.
I mean, it's our government, right? Just
why have a courthouse and the fancy robes and all this stuff, and they take a case, but then they say, "Oh, I'm going to punt on it."
I just think it's really funny that they don't have the time to write an opinion. How much money we spent, how much money the funders spent, how much we went through to not even get a written opinion. That to me, and this is not this is government. Government, look at all the inflation. They just print money, right? It's not that they can't get more judges, right? I don't want to go too far off this, but this is not the type of due process that you think someone should get to go through when they are doing this. Where is the reward in all this, right? Risk reward. It needs to be balanced more out, and I think that this is
the system is rigged. Rule 36 was made to be an exception, and it's put out in half the cases. We have an extraordinary case that supported our claims against these pirates. And to be Rule 36 on this is basically the legal system giving us the finger. It's terrible.
I'm familiar with the Rule 36, but I still had to look up this decision to just see what it is. And it's literally 2 lines that says the judgment is affirmed. And you had 2 federal district court judges, which obviously disagreed with each other about the claim construction, including one who changed her mind about the claim construction. And yet the federal circuit, like you said, didn't even provide a rationale for why they were affirming this or why she changed her mind.
She changed her mind after the trial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Way after the trial.
After the trial. You're sharing this story. You said you mortgaged your house for this company. At this point, you devoted in some ways, your whole life based on your faith in this patent. But, some cynic might be out there. They might say, well, you would have been upset anyways, even if they wrote out an opinion. Do you think you would have felt any better if the federal circuit at least took their time in trying to come up with some kind of rationale for why they reached their decision?
Well, if they could have pointed to some matter of law or some reason or something that went wrong, but they couldn't. They would have wrote it if they could. If it was easy, they could have. They just punted.
Well, I think it just sets a bad precedent, right? Why not just write something, right?
It's obviously quite the story, but how have you been able to survive after this lawsuit as a company, finding out that realistically you couldn't really enforce your patents in that situation? How have you been able to do that?
Well, we have a few customers that are very good to us. We do really well on QVC. We sell as a great Christmas gift. And I just work hard. I go and I knock on doors of different retailers all the time, and we're a great product. We sell very well. People see this as a great gift for someone who might have everything, or it just has that unique wow factor. When you squeeze the handles, the jaws come down. It's completely unique, and so it's a battle, and we continue to do well. Now, if we didn't have this whole thing, like I said, we would have continued to do our commercials and be tagging other retailers. And when you're doing that much commercials on TV, it drives a lot of volume to the stores. And that's where we were with Sears. In 2011, we were doing national DRTV commercials, that's direct response television commercials, directing them to Sears with the goal of going to the other retailers after that as one possibility. And that's when they cut us off. And so, it's one of these things where it really would be great to see where we could have gone at that point. And that's what I think is most frustrating, is that right when we were about to kind of have that great trajectory, they did this to us, and they kind of stopped that. And
they poisoned the water in the well.
And so that but for right now, we're still doing well, but we should be doing much better in terms of if we didn't have to deal with this. But at this point, I'm now, and so is my dad, we were just going out, and it's one of these things that happens, and you can just kind of pivot a little bit. And we spend some time, obviously, talking to great people like you and others to spread the word, so that we can try to make a difference and change, and just kind of show some of the problems. All these problems are fixable, and I think that that's kind of what we want to do now, is to try to shine a light on some of the problems, so that hopefully we can fix them, and hopefully the fix is done properly. A lot of times when people try to fix things, they actually make them worse, right? So
yeah. in the beginning about you growing up, watching the role that patents played in your dad's life and his business career. And then you go through this experience. Now you run LoggerHead Tools. How has that shaped your view of the role of patents in your day-to-day business decisions?
So I mean, I'm still a big pro patent. I started InstaShield right after the pandemic. My dad and I worked on the shield together, and I with him got a few patents on that. And so I still believe in patents because I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business person, and it's not perfect, but it's certainly it needs to be reformed. But I will always file patents for something that I think is worth value. Obviously, those
I think if you don't, then you shouldn't even put any money into it, because as soon as you make it successful, even a patent that is yet to been litigated or whatever, most people will avoid it. I think the efficient infringers are the ones that have gone through this efficient infringement, won on it. I think about the knockoffs like the bunch of balloons and Apex tools with us. They're emboldened by this process, and so they wait to see if it's successful. Then it's successful, they'll go and knock you off. So I think if the pandemic raged and InstaShield scaled, we would have had knockoffs, and we would have had to go through this whole thing over again. Which is a shame.
But I think that also, some of the things I learned from the LoggerHead deal is that, it's not just the patents, right? Having really good trade dress, really good trademarks, and great branding and things like that are super important, because I see in the future more issues with online retailers, right? So in the past, it's been, these big major players like Walmarts and all these that you have they buy and sell a lot of product. But now in the future, it's more e-commerce. So it's going to be more whack-a-mole, more of a lot of third-party sellers knocking you off. And the easiest way to get things off of Amazon, eBay, Walmart.com, all these e-commerce sites is what I found is trademarks. They don't really like to deal with patents. Now, I'd still get patents because you still have those issues with the major retailers, but the trade dress, the names and things like that, I found to be very useful. And it's very important to have those because that can be an easy fix for some of these, what I'd say smaller resellers, which are going to become much larger as we continue to move more and more to e-commerce.
So there's one caveat there, though, that yes, if they are knocking your trademark off, but if they're knocking your patent off, but they put a different name on it, then you're in that same old quandary. You can buy knockoffs off Amazon, and we have a person working for the company that's all she's doing is taking these down, and they'll take them down finally after all this work, and then they'd show up under another name and later. And this isn't even a question. This is a direct knockoff, and we have a trademark on the shape of the wrench. It's you can't stop it.
But there are some people that just patent a product, but they're not really good at marketing, and they're not good at creating the brand identity and those things. And those things are very valuable. And if you can do that, it just helps you out, right? Nothing's going to be super easy in this field, and business isn't easy in general, right? So not expecting it to be, but I think it helps your odds of making it so that your identity is something that maybe the people that want to knock you off at least want to have.
You have to go beyond patents. Trade dress is important, and I think there's a holistic approach to the design process to create that. There's no question about it. But from the reality is, people can ship product from China in the mail from parts of China to Chicago cheaper than we can ship from our plant in Pennsylvania to Chicago. It's ridiculous. And so how do you go after those 1,000 independent shipments versus 1,000 pieces coming in, through a container or something, right?
That's a whole podcast you can do. I learned so much about these e-commerce sites and what works and doesn't work for taking them down. And just the fact that so much counterfeit product is almost like laundered through Amazon and these other places, because people can sell counterfeits underneath official listings, and it's insane. But that's maybe a story for another day.
No, I think that's a lot of good practical advice and highlighting a lot of other issues that kind of favor those that engage in those kind of practices where they produce counterfeit products. Somebody listening to this might be shocked by your level of optimism after all this. Somebody else going through that experience could say, I'm done with patents. I'm done with innovation. I'm just going to do what these other folks do. Just, copy others' products, get them made in China, and sell those. What still makes you believe in the patent system? What still makes you want to fight to improve it, even though it didn't serve you in the way you thought it would?
Well, I can give you a little bit of a positive story here, and it's not really because of the patent system, but after after the pandemic hit, my father and I worked on the product called the InstaShield, and over 6 months, we launched that, and I started selling those on our website around April 15th. Within 6 months, we sold 1 million face shields, and we also donated 1 million. So we did a 1-for-1 donation through our Million Shield Challenge. And when this happened, and I invested into this company, and what I knew is that we can get this design was so great that we can make this immediately. And we didn't really have to compete with foreign Chinese knockoffs because, we weren't even getting PPE from China for N95s for doctors and nurses. And so as a businessman, I knew that, okay, we're going to be probably selling most of these before the patent even comes out. Now, of course, we still filed for the patent, but within 6 months, we sold 1 million of these. And what it was is that I've learned is that we got to be quick to market. We got to, we have to have great branding, great storytelling, great identity, and we started doing a lot of Facebook ads. And I actually got this created a commercial and had this on national TV. On CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, because that's where everyone was kind of going to get their news, and we did that all before a patent even was issued. And so I'm still optimistic because as a business person, there's still a lot of opportunity, right? Patents are very useful, and that needs to be reformed. So I'm just more overall optimistic person, but yeah, there is major problems, but I just don't really think that sitting around you thinking that.
But I think I would put it in context. Fortunately, the InstaShield was really a great design for assembly manufacturing combination. So we were able to mass produce it in a pretty automated way. If we had to go out and hire 100 people and build a plant and put $1 million in tooling and do that, I don't know that you can do that. That strategy works, and that's a good business strategy, and make it in the States is definitely conscious capitalism. But that's not creating a lot of jobs. That's not a product that's going to create jobs. Like the wrench has people that work in a manufacturing line. Those are jobs, and they're good paying jobs if they're done right. The reality is, if we want jobs, if we want innovation, which every cycle of politics, every politician says we need more innovation and more investment in innovation. I see it all the time in the PPAC committee. We have to expand innovation because we want to create jobs and the social and economic benefit of taxes that come from those. We have to support the ability to sustain businesses that make those investments. But we have a cannibalistic system that the people that make that risk or take that risk, like our example, do it, but then you can't, in our case, it's a crazy example, you can't protect the patent. How can you then invest in those jobs? How can you do that? I'm 65 years old now. Could I do that again right now? I probably wouldn't have any retirement left again if I went through that. And I for sure wouldn't. And so the reality is that this crazy system we have, this cannibalistic system where the mythology is, patents are strong and inventors are wonderful and all this stuff that everybody drinks the Kool-Aid on and buys into, is just it's insane. It's you can't protect them. And even now, we haven't even talked about, we didn't go through the PTAB, which has been a whole nother level of facilitating infringement. PTAB was started right when this started here, and I think that they didn't realize how that it was the death squad that it was back then, that they could have PTAB'd us and even drawn it out more. We may not even now been able to get a contingency attorney with what's going on in the PTAB, and we didn't suffer that. But when I see what went on with like Josh Malone and Bunch of Balloons and other people, it's crazy. As a person who's working with the patent office on a PPAC, I just look at this really irony. We have one side of the house that gives patents and one side that takes them away. And the unbelievable thing is that it's all under the same domain, and I can't reconcile it. It doesn't make sense. And Many people feel it was the reforms of the past and the past Director Iancu have gone a long way, but I don't think they've gone far enough. I have no faith that if we brought another Bionic Wrench type product out, proved that it would sell, tried to make it in the States, that we would certainly have those knockoffs and have to go through the same thing. And if the knockoff was a Goliath, it's not even the chance that you're right or wrong. It's can you come up with the money to protect yourself. I don't know that we could get a investor and a lawyer group that would do it on contingency. It's that risky.
A lot of the problems that you described with the patent system. I just want to touch base on what Dan said, about those face shields that you came up with and made them in the United States, because every time that I still have to buy face masks at CVS or on Amazon, they're all still coming with a slip of paper made in China. And such an odd feeling that 2 years in, these typical single-use face masks are made in China. You ever wear something made in America?
Well, and that's the crazy thing, to just really quickly touch on this, is that COVID, I think that proved to us that we were way too reliant on other countries for manufacturing. And I think that all essential goods, so PPE, pharmaceuticals, things that are very important for the infrastructure, they need to be 100% made in the United States. Now, think about this. 80% of pharmaceuticals have at least one active ingredient that is not made in the United States. A lot of them are made in China and India. That's crazy. I mean, these are life or death products, right? So I think hopefully the silver lining on this horrible pandemic is that we get to see, okay, hey, we need to make these things here. Look at the car shortages, right? These chips that are not made in the United States. So we have everything else except the chips, computer chips for the cars. So, without a strong intellectual property system, it's going to be hard for people to want to invest the time and money to make their products here when they know that someone's just going to go and make the same thing in another country and then say, hey, okay, well, let's have a legal battle, but the extra money we're making, we'll just use to fund the legal battle.
So we can go one step beyond it too. And so what you saw with those masks, they're a commodity. And they're made with automatic equipment. And there's actually companies making them in the States. Dan and I visited one to look and see if it was a compatible product to sell with the shields. But even the companies in the States can't make it to compete with the price that is coming from China. That I'll tell you that I always go at Christmas time and look at the tools in the different big boxes, and I can take tool set and I can break it down to steel and plastic and then look at the prices. And, there's just no way you can make that, even if you didn't have any labor costs or investment in the States at that price. The subsidies and the games that are played with the Chinese, lowering the value of the yuan, even though we added, burdens of import duties, it doesn't make any sense. There's no rational way that it can be done. You can get a 20-piece screwdriver set that's pretty decent quality. I'd seen one on special at a big box for like $8. You can't buy the raw materials for that here. And so why can't you get face masks here? You can't even buy the raw materials at what the materials are being made in those imported products. Now, I think here, one of the things is that raw materials have to be made according to, human rights, civil rights, property rights, environmental rights, and that adds cost. And here you're going to get, if it says M95, it's going to be an M95. But I don't think you always get that same level of meeting the specifications from the imported products, because basically there's no downside for them to do that.
Anybody who ordered a product online and it comes made in China, they know it's not always what you're promised. You were selected by Director Iancu to be on the patent advisory committee, and I'm guessing through that you got to meet some other people with different point of views. I mean, what have you learned about why is the patent system the way it is, aside from some of the specific issues that you identified about the PTAB and so forth? What do you think it will take for it to get back to where it should be?
Well, so this reminds me of a question I had at that conference where I was on a DS talking about this, and I think there's one easy fix. that we make willful infringement criminally prosecutable, harmonize it with copyrights and trademarks, because I think the people that are doing this, while they're willing to pay a fine, which is often far less than they make on it, so it's a business model, that they don't want to go to jail and they don't want to suffer that. So that would immediately, in my mind, stop a lot of it. Now, that doesn't mean everybody's going to jail that violates a patent. Willfulness has a standard that's been adjudicated, and there's a lot of precedential opinions that there's not a lot of people going to jail for, ripping off music like they used to, or videos or whatever. That there would be a next level of accountability that would stop a lot of this right now. Aside from that, the way Congress has implemented changes, I think probably with good intentions but unintended consequences, we've weakened the system. And when we created this PTAB, it was not to be a death squad. It was to be a faster, cheaper, fairer way to get out patents that maybe shouldn't have been issued. The whole narrative was around trolls back then and how people were abusing patents, and there's no question. So I think willful trolling, criminal prosecution. I think it should be on both sides. And that would stop also a lot of that abuses of it. But I never saw a lot of that trolling. I think it was a very trumped up hysteria to really weaken the system. What happened then was that the PTAB was established with rules that I think it's a difference, and I've asked this to the colleagues and people in the patent office. I believe when we get a patent, that the level of obviousness to get a patent is at one level, but to lose it is another one. And the PTAB judges, I do not think, are the subject matter experts that we have in the examining corps. And so you have an electrical engineering degree. Okay, I'm going to work on this technology. If that's the first time you've seen that, and then you're looking at it, it's human nature to have this hindsight reconstruction bias, and I think that's what's going on. Plus, and I don't know that it's happening, but other things or other elements that are supporting people to circle the wagons around the PTAB versus really to reflect on it and see, are we using the same standard to give patents that we are to taking them away? And I personally don't see that. And so I've been on the PTAB for 1 year, and I didn't come out with guns blazing. I just wanted to learn what was going on and build trust and respect, because there's going to be no solution to this without an involvement of the patent office being part of the solution. Sure, Congress can come in and make some changes, or we can get some court cases, but I've found very good quality, intelligent people in the patent office. I mean, it's not a bunch of deadbeats at all. They work hard. They seem to know what they're doing. I don't believe they have the empathy for the small inventor at the top of their minds, because they're not inventors. I think that they're dominated by the legal thinking of, what is the definition of is sometimes, which drives me nuts. But the point of the matter is, in practicality, that I think that there needs to be much more representation of the small inventor in this discussion. And I even think the director of the patent office should be an inventor. We have plenty of lawyers around there. We have plenty of administrators who run the patent office. It's run, I think, fairly well for a bureaucracy. I think the people do care, but we have the situation of the patent office being run and efficient and getting patents out and patent quality. And then you have, when a new president comes in, they appoint Secretary of Commerce, and they appoint heads of these government offices, and the wind can sort of shift. So people are very sensitive to that. But the bottom line is, the stakeholder that's the most important at the patent office should be the inventor. And then the last part of the question, I just say there's a big push, and people are saying we don't have enough minority and female inventors, and we need to raise that. And I agree 100%. But I don't think just running around talking about it is going to change that. You can't take a magic wand and hit somebody on the head as a young person or whatever, and all of a sudden make them an inventor. There's an inventor's mindset and training and situation that we have to do. And structurally, that's not going to change overnight. And so while we're all involved in inclusion and creating creating more people. I tell you what, on a daily basis, I work with students. I train them to be inventors. I see knowledge creation as part of what we do here in design, and I know what it takes to get it there. And I sort of see this, how could I say, I saw the similar with when we were reforming the environmental laws, the greenwashing it was called back then, where people were talking about cleaning up the environment, but nobody was cleaning up the environment. And actually, until they made these violations criminally prosecutable to corporate officers, did it actually change. And I see a bit of the greenwashing going on now, and I want to participate in trying to effect this change to create more inventors from all people, and they all have the same rights. And I'll end with this. So say we tomorrow had all these more diverse inventors. What's going to happen when you put them into this meat grinder system and they get treated like we've been treated, and they realize that, while we have more diverse inventors, it's just like sending more sheep to the slaughter. It doesn't make any sense.
I think that's an interesting point. If seeing what's happening with the patent system isn't really encouraging for that diverse pool of potential inventors to go and file patent applications if they hear stories like yours or even stories about at the PTAB. And go back to your idea about the willful patent infringement, I think that is a very interesting idea. I heard it first when you shared it at the IP Watch conference. It doesn't even have to be, the penalties don't have to be jail time, but like you said, at least making it criminally wrong might change the thinking of these executives about how they do business.
I think that the penalties have to be potentially there. I don't know that we don't send everybody to the electric chair. That there's there's judgment used when the penalty or the punishment they put it in relative comparison to the level of the crime, and we can do that with murder. We do that every day. I think that the criminal prosecution, though, needs to be there because we have serial offenders. I mean, you look at the bunch of balloons guy. I mean, this is a business model, and it's like sanctioning robbing banks. No one would say, okay, it's okay to rob banks, and they have to pay a fine once in a while. It's as egregious as that, though most people don't experience it, so they don't see it that way.
We could probably talk all day about this, but I want to end with hopefully a fun question. A lot of people listening to this will hear this fun dynamic two of you have, and they'll be thinking, that'd be really awesome to go into business with my son or my dad. What advice would you give them about how to do that?
Well, I would say that you have to learn how to do a lot of deep breathing and meditation because
I would say you need to have a hyperbolic chamber in your bedroom because you need the deep breathing may raise your oxygen level and lower your stress, but it can get very, very tough.
But I mean, all jokes aside, I mean, those things are accurate. But if you can make it work, it's fantastic, right? And it's not easy, but nothing is easy. But over time, I feel like it's been like a marriage, right? We fight all the time, but then at the same time, that for us at least has made us stronger, right? Because you don't want to be around yes men. You also don't want to be around someone who always is telling you you're wrong when maybe you're right. But what happens is, I think that we usually meet in the middle. And it's a good thing. We also happen to have complementary skill sets, and so that's good. But man, there's been a lot of big blowout fights. But all in all, I feel very, very fortunate to work with my dad. I've learned a lot, and I'm glad that we didn't get divorced in this marriage at any point.
And I often goof around about it, but one, I say, this didn't happen by accident, and if he could somehow go back and say, even before he was born, he influenced me and what I did. But as a father, I had an amazing mother who nurtured me and was very smart and instilled a lot of ethics and moral values, and I did that, and she was part of my kid's life. And though my father was a hard worker or whatever, he didn't have that level that my mother achieved. And so they got the benefit, and he got the benefit of her, which was great. And for me, I think it's sort of a natural thing. If you are committed, and you can, again, not kill each other, that to be doing this. And it's I'm very proud of Dan and what he's achieved. And I often get the question is, how did this happen? Normally the apple's running away from the tree, but this apple fell by the tree. And the fact that what he does and how he does it, he doesn't have to. And I respect that. And he's my first grad student. And I think in this case, I gave him the ability to get out there, but he himself chose the path he took.
It's been a blast. I'm glad we got to do this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Eli.
Thanks, Eli.
Thank you for listening to Clause 8. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others and leave a 5-star rating. I'd also like to thank my firm, Hardy & Hardy LLP, for their generous support. Clause 8 is produced by Great Feeling Studios and Brick Brewer. For more information, visit voiceofip.com. Thanks for listening.